I am Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. And on today's show, we're going to look at the updated list of Dolphins draft targets for the first round in late April after the first couple weeks of NFL free agency. The Dolphins need a lot of additions to this roster. Defensive line, corner, left guard, safety. Those are the top four positions in my opinion, but they could also still use a tight end too. I like Pharaoh Brown. I don't like Julian Hill. But yeah, they could use a tight end too. Not as important as the other four. But I did want to look at the updated first round targets for the Miami Dolphins on this episode. And I want to make sure you are also following me over on Twitter first. At Nic_Rohloff is my handle. I want to give a shout out to these five people. I said earlier this week that when you follow me on Twitter, I'll give you a follow back if you're one of the first five. These were the five that did. Ernie Gonzalez to his left arm, Justice 305, Corey Spencer, and Tyler Foster. Shout out to the five of y'all for giving me a follow. And if you'd want more Dolphins news, rumors, and highlights, well, Nic_Rohloff is the handle. All right, the number one target for me with the Dolphins' 13th overall pick is Will Campbell, the offensive lineman from LSU. And I'll actually unveil the second one right away as well and talk about these two in a group. Armand Membou, the offensive lineman from Missouri. These are the two best offensive linemen in the draft, in my opinion. Both are offensive tackles at SEC levels last year, Campbell being a left tackle, Membou being a right tackle, but both can be projected to be both offensive guards and offensive tackles in the NFL. And right now, as things currently stand, most NFL evaluators have Armand Membou ahead of Will Campbell on their big boards, and some people believe Membou might go top 5 in the draft. I've seen some mock drafts still have Membou go around that 11, 12, 13 range, which is why I still have him on this list. But when you compare the two, you're going to think Membou's the better player because of how well he performed last season. And I understand that. He played extremely well last year for that Missouri offense. And he showed unbelievable athleticism and fluidity at the NFL Combine, just putting up ridiculous numbers on the RAS score. And I do have Armand Membou as my number one pure offensive tackle. I think he projects as a better offensive tackle than Will Campbell. But to me, when you're talking about who fits the Dolphins roster and scheme the best, I actually lean Will Campbell, which is why I had him as my number one Dolphins target rather than number two. I'm also factoring in a little bit the likelihood that they're ultimately there when the Dolphins are picking at 13. If I had to put a gun to my head and say, would any of these two players be on the board at 13 for Chris Grier, I would probably say no, because both of them will go in the top 12 in my opinion. But I do think Will Campbell is much more likely to slide down boards to Miami at 13. And I've said it very often, even if you sign another veteran free agent at left guard on a one-year deal, I would absolutely draft Will Campbell if he's still on the board for the Dolphins with the 13th pick. Let me know your thoughts. Which offensive lineman would you prefer if you're a Dolphins fan? Type WC if it's Will Campbell. Type AM if it's Armand Membou. Moving over to my number third prospect, it's actually going to be the corner from Michigan, Will Johnson. Dolphins need a boundary corner opposite of Jalen Ramsey in a bad way, and Will Johnson would fill that void, but also be your CB1 of the future when Ramsey is inevitably off this roster in 2 to 3 seasons. Johnson has just had a ridiculously good past 2 years for the Michigan Wolverines when he's been on the football field. That was the issue this past year for Johnson. If he stayed on the football field, didn't battle injuries, and play in 6 games, but then also ran at the combine and ran a 40-yard dash in the 4.4s or low 4.5s, I think he would be a top 10 lock. But due to the injuries and no combine or pro day, well, Will Johnson is sliding down boards because his 2023 tape was just ridiculous. He led that Wolverine secondary to a national championship, and coming into this past collegiate season, he was a projected lock to be in the top 5. And now there's a very high possibility he is on the board for 13. And based off mock drafts lately from Mel Kiper and Will Johnson, Daniel Jeremiah, they expect Will Johnson to be there at 13 because the Dolphins passed on Will Johnson in both of those two experts' mocks. To me, I would not if Will Campbell and Membou are off the board. I really like Will Johnson. Coming in at number 4 is another player that's been popularly linked to the Miami Dolphins, that being Malaki Starks, the safety from Georgia, who met with the Dolphins at the NFL Combine and at his pro day looked unbelievable in his drills. I mean, the hip movements, his ability to high point the football, even toe tap on the sideline when making a reception, how quickly he's able to flip his hips and accelerate. It's just a different type of athlete, man, and he would be a home run pick at 13 if you needed that safety position still. I think Starks is a top 5 player in this class, in my opinion. And like, shoot me, like, I don't care. Like, I'll die on this hill. I have no problem admitting this, that if you take away positional value, safeties are valued much lower than corners, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, wide receivers, quarterbacks, the whole 9 yard. You take away positional value and just say, how good is this player at their position, and how likely is it that this player will be a Pro Bowl or All-Pro at their position? I think Starks is going to be in my top 5 in that terms of likelihood. And I mentioned that pro day that Malaki Starks flashed at. Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel, and Anthony Weaver were all there watching in attendance. Also could have been for Michael Williams and Jalen Walker, 2 first-round projections as well. But I really like Malaki Starks. And to me, when you talk about the first 4 players I've mentioned on today's show, Starks, Will Johnson, Membou, Will Campbell. If any of those 4 names are called when the Dolphins are on the clock for pick number 13, I will be clapping, I'll be jumping, I'll be hyping up the chat in excitement. Because to me, you can't go wrong. You need a left guard, you need a safety, you need a corner, and those are 4 of the top players at the position. I would be thrilled if any of these 4 players are Dolphins at 13. And make sure you are subscribed for the draft, because we will have you covered wall to wall now to late April for that draft. And you can guarantee another thing, folks. We will be live on an NFL draft day, reacting to the picks ahead of Miami, reacting to the Dolphins pick live, as well as breaking it down. So hit that sub button and join the channel today. Number 5 on my list, tight end Tyler Warren. And I know. It's not the biggest need for Miami, but this dude's a freaking freak. And he just really is. 6'5", 256, flashes physicality in the run game as a blocker, the athleticism to make catches over the middle of the field in a crowd, yards after catch, contested catch rate. There's a reason why, to me, there's very rare blue chip prospects. He's one of them. I have 3 blue chip prospects where, to me, there's just, you can't miss. Warren at tight end, Travis Hunter at whatever position you want to call him, and then Abdul Carter at edge. Those are my 3. I think Starks is on that fringe realm for safety, but Warren, dominating player, would just change your entire offense. He would. He would force you to have more 2 tight end looks, and he would have way more of a threat, because the Dolphins run a lot of 2 tight end sets, with Durham Smythe and Julian Hill being moved around behind Jonnu Smith. But you now have Tyler Warren, who's a infinity better pass catcher than Durham Smythe or Julian Hill, and as equal as a run blocker. Your offense would just take a massive leap forward. And yeah, it's hard for me to say draft Tyler Warren because of the bigger need at corner, defensive line, offensive line, safety. But if Warren was on the board at 13, which I don't think he will, I think he'll be a top 10 pick, but there are some people that believe he will be on the board, like Daniel Jeremiah. If he's there at 13 and they drafted him, I tell you what, I wouldn't be that upset. All right, we are sponsored by Prize Picks. We're going to get to my last 5 draft targets in a second, but I want to give a shout out to the #1 daily fantasy sports platform out there. I play Prize Picks every single day because I can customize the way I play with different players across different sports leagues and win up to 1,000 times your money. And on Prize Picks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite basketball players with players from baseball, hockey, esports, and much more. Prize Picks also offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And like I mentioned, you can play in so many different ways. Daily, season-long as well. I have a season-long baseball entry here, more than on Paul Skeens and Tarek Skubal strikeouts, more than on Jaron Duran home runs there. Join me and the millions of others on Prize Picks right now by downloading the app, and make sure you use code CLNS when you're signing up to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today, use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, we're going to get into my back half of targets here for Dolphins at pick number 13. Number 6 on my list, defensive back Jahdae Barron. And I put DB for a reason. It's because he is such a versatile player that can play 3 different positions on this back end of the Dolphins defense. And his best year of his career was this past season for the Texas Longhorns. I mean, look at how many times he was tested in coverage as a boundary corner, and he lived up to the hype, man. A completion percentage of under 50%, a QB rating of 33.1, 5 takeaways, no touchdowns allowed. Barron was an absolute dominating force for that Texas defense last year. And he is a fascinating prospect for a lot of reasons. I just briefly mentioned the versatility a second ago. That is something on display here with Jahdae, because he could play nickel, he could play safety, and he could play boundary corner in the NFL. At Texas, he played boundary last season. They wanted him. He wanted it to boost his draft stock, and he performed well in a tough SEC conference. And then the years before, he played in that star type of defensive role that Jalen Ramsey played for the Rams, where it's a nickel, safety, box, defensive back hybrid. So if the Dolphins drafted him, you're getting a chess piece on the defensive side of the ball. He could play deep free safety. He could play in the box. He could play in the nickel. Play boundary corner, which is why I have him very, very high on my board. Number 7 is a player that I don't think we've talked a lot about, but I really actually like this player, and it's the defensive lineman from Michigan, Kenneth Grant. I believe that this is someone Chris Grier will really, really like. He has a high motor. He is an unbelievable athlete for his size. I mean, you look at this guy. This guy is a space eater, 6'3" and 5'8", 331 pounds. He was productive in both rushing the passer as well as stopping the run last season for the Wolverines, was equally as good in 2023 as that Michigan defense was leading that offense to a national championship. And as I mentioned just a second ago, I expect Chris Grier to like Kenneth Grant, because to me, Kenneth Grant possesses a lot of the same skill sets and qualities as Christian Wilkins, who he drafted, ironically, with the 13th overall pick in the 2018 NFL Draft. Grant, look up the highlight. I forget who he tracked down, but he was obviously in the middle of that defensive line, running back. It might have been Penn State, breaks out to the left side, running down the field, gets into the second level. You know who tracks him down from behind? Kenneth Grant. Dude's a freak athlete for his size, and I would expect Chris Grier to like him. How much does he like him? Because 13 could be the highest point Kenneth Grant goes, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was picked by Miami. Another DB here, Nic Rohloff, the safety from South Carolina. This is someone who went from a fringe first-round pick, early second-round guy, to now a first-round lock, it feels like. Very high on Daniel Jeremiah's board, and I think his ceiling in the NFL Draft is to be selected by the Miami Dolphins at pick number 13. Someone who just rose up boards due to his performance at the NFL Combine, had a ridiculous RAS score, and it was a perfect 10. Dude's 6'2", physical. People compare him to Cam Chancellor due to his physicality and size. He also had a good year in terms of covering as well. The Dolphins have a top 30 visit scheduled with Nic Rohloff. So this is clearly someone Miami is interested in. They want to get to learn about him even more, and it could be a name you see linked to the Dolphins at 13 as we get closer and closer to late April. Isn't my favorite prospect, but I do think he is someone a lot of people like. Who is your favorite Dolphins draft target? Could be a first-round guy like the players we're mentioning today. Could be a guy in the second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round. Doesn't matter to me. Just drop an NFL draft prospect that you really like for the Miami Dolphins. Number 9 here out of 10, Jahdae Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. I don't think Miami goes with Campbell, but this is a player I really like. Campbell was elite for Alabama last season. He is good in coverage. He is a downhill run stopper as well. But the Dolphins re-signed Tyrell Dodson, brought in KJ Britt on a 1-year deal. I just wouldn't expect Campbell to be the pick for Miami at 13, but he is a stud, and I think he's going to be an excellent NFL football player. Defensive lineman here, Derek Harmon from Oregon. I think Harmon is a very, very good defensive lineman. I think 13 might be a little bit rich for him. I think Kenneth Grant's probably too rich at 13. I think Grant and Harmon are both in that range of late teens, early 20s to mid 20s, but Harmon can do it both in the run game as well as pass rushing. Had 5 sacks for the Ducks last season. Good size at 6'4", 313. I like Harmon a lot. The thing is with me, which is why I have Grant and Harmon on my list, but 7 and 10 respectively, is that I don't anticipate Miami going defensive line in the first round. I think they could, and I wouldn't be upset if they did. But the thing is this defensive lineman class is super, super deep. You can get a guy like T.J. Sanders from South Carolina in round 2. Deanna Walker out of Kentucky in round 3. There's just so many good D linemen. We talked about it. The 3-4 positions that have been labeled as the most deep in this draft class: safety, defensive line, running back, tight end. Which is why it would be hard-pressed for me to see the Dolphins go D-line or safety, or not safety, but D-line or tight end in round 1. Could see them going safety because of how good those players are, but we'll see what Miami ultimately does when the draft rolls around. And like I mentioned, we'll be live during the NFL draft. We'll be live throughout the next 4 or 5 weeks leading up to the draft with videos every single day as well. So hit that sub button and join us here at Dolphins Today.